world is currently witnessing the largest mass treason event in living history. But instead of being fearful, we should be filled with hope. Instead of fighting among ourselves, we should face our only true enemy, the criminal deep state.
Today, we stand together all around the world, joined in a common purpose to remake the planet into a haven of joy and understanding and goodness.
Michael Jackson, along with Princess Diana, may have known too much and were silenced. After all, isn't it strange that all three of them have burial sites resembling Q? On within our world. So it makes you wonder. JFK Jr. might have done all of this in the name of his father, in his own desire to finish what he started. You see, many claim which would bring an end to the Vatican's plans of spreading Catholicism to Vietnam. Another theory states that JFK wanted to close the Federal Reserve, which would have seized the funds for the Jesuits. In my opinion, the theory that stands out the most from the rest is JFK wanting to reveal the Jesuits' influence in the United States government. Some theorists point to this theory due to a speech JFK gave that they nicknamed the Secret Society's speech.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed.
Could this be what JFK Jr. meant when he said finish what his father started? To understand the power the Vatican has had for centuries, have a look at this video uploaded by Vatican Crimes on YouTube.
Did the world wars, revolutions, and big events of human history evolve naturally, or were they calculated and pre-planned? If they were pre-planned, who planned them, and what are they planning for the future of humanity? The answer to this puzzling question can be found within the boundaries of 3 of the world's most powerful cities. Those 3 cities belong to no nation and pay no taxes. They are Washington's District of Columbia, which is not part of the city of Washington or of the United States, the inner city of London, which is not part of London or England, and Vatican City, which is not part of Rome or Italy. These cities, called city-states, have their own independent flag, their own separate laws, and their own separate identity.
Vatican City is in fact a state, the smallest principality in the world. It lies on the banks of the Tiber, completely surrounded by the city of Rome. Its status as a separate state emerged from the Lateran Agreements of February 1929. It has its own newspaper, postal service, radio and television station, its own flag, and a population of about 1,000.
The Vatican also has its own army of Swiss guards, and it even has its own prison. The Vatican rules over approximately 2 billion of the world's 6.1 billion people. The colossal wealth of the Vatican includes enormous investments with the Rothschilds in Britain, France, and the USA, and with giant oil and weapons corporations like Shell and General Electric. The Vatican solid gold bullion worth billions is stored with the Rothschild-controlled Bank of England and the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank. The Catholic Church is the biggest financial power, wealth accumulator, and property owner in existence, possessing more material wealth than any bank, corporation, giant trust, or government anywhere on the globe. The Pope, who is the visible ruler of this colossal global wealth, is one of the richest men on earth. While 2/3 of the world earns less than $2 a day, and 1/5 of the world is underfed or profits from it on the stock market, and at the same time preaches about giving. How did the Pope and Vatican accumulate all that wealth over the millennium? One method was to put a price tag on sin. Many bishops and popes actively marketed guilt, sin, and fear for profit by selling indulgences. Worshippers were encouraged to prepay for sins they hadn't yet committed and get pardoned ahead of time. Those who didn't pay up risked eternal damnation in Satan's oven. Pope Leo X rebuilt St. Peter's Basilica, selling tickets out of hell and tickets to heaven. During the Dark Ages, the Catholic Church not only hoarded the wealth they collected from the poor, but hoarded knowledge. They kept the masses ignorant and in the dark by denying them a basic education. Like Vatican City, London's inner city is also a privately owned corporation or city-state, located right smack in the heart of Greater London. It became a sovereign state in 1694 when King William III of Orange privatized and turned the Bank of England over to the bankers. By 1812, Nathan Rothschild crashed the English stock market and control of the Bank of England. Today, the city-state of London is the world's financial power center and the wealthiest square mile on England, Lloyd's of London, the London Stock Exchange, all British banks, the branch offices of 385 foreign banks, and 70 U.S. banks. It has its own courts, its own laws, its own flag, and its own police force. It's not part of Greater London or England or the British Commonwealth and pays no taxes. The city-state of London houses Fleet Street's newspaper and publishing monopolies. It is also the headquarters for worldwide English Freemasonry and headquarters for the worldwide money cartel known as the Crown. Contrary to popular belief, the Crown is not the royal family or the British monarch. The Crown is the private corporate city-state of London. It has a council of 12 members who rule the corporation under a mayor called the Lord Mayor. The Lord Mayor and his 12-member council serve as proxies or representatives who sit in for 13 of the world's wealthiest, most powerful banking families. This ring of 13 ruling families includes the Rothschild family, the Warburg family, the Oppenheimer family, and the Schiff family. These families and their descendants run the Crown Corporation of London. The Crown Corporation holds the title to worldwide Crown land in Crown colonies like Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. The British Parliament and the British Prime Minister serve as a public front for the hidden power of these ruling Crown families. Like the city-state of London and the Vatican, a third city-state was officially created in 1982. That city-state is called the District of Columbia and is located on 10 square miles of land in the heart of Washington. The District of Columbia flies its own flag and has its own independent constitution. Although geographically separate, the city-states of London, the Vatican, and the District of Columbia are one interlocking empire called Empire of the City. The flag of Washington's District of Columbia has 3 red stars, one for each city-state in the 3-city empire. This corporate empire of 3 city-states controls the world economically through London's inner city, militarily through the District of Columbia, and spiritually through the Vatican. The Constitution for the District of Columbia operates under a tyrannical Roman law known as Lex Fori, which bears no resemblance to the U.S. Constitution. When Congress passed the Act of 1871, it created a separate corporate government for the District of Columbia. This act allowed the District of Columbia to operate as a corporation outside the original Constitution of the United States and outside of the best interests of American citizens. Corporation of the United States. Like Canada and Australia, whose leaders are prime ministers of the Queen and whose land is called Crown land, the United States is just another Crown colony. Crown colonies are controlled by the empire of 3 city-states. At the center of each city-state is a towering, phallic-shaped stone monument called an obelisk that points skyward. In D.C. city-state, The obelisk, known as the Washington Monument, was dedicated to Freemason George Washington by the Freemason Grand Lodge of the District of Columbia. The secretive Brotherhood of Freemasons laid the Washington obelisk's cornerstone in 1848 and contributed 22 Masonic memorial stones. 250 Masonic lodges financed the Washington Monument obelisk, including the Knights Templar Masonic Order. At the heart of London city-state is a 187-ton, 69-foot-tall Egyptian obelisk called Cleopatra's Needle. It was transported from Egypt and erected on the banks of the River Thames. In Vatican City, another Egyptian obelisk towers high above St. Peter's Square. What exactly is an obelisk? Obelisks are phallic-shaped monuments honoring the pagan sun god of ancient Egypt called Amun-Ra. The spirit of this pagan god is said to reside...
is certainly one of the most corrupt organizations in history. The ultimate weapon in the war for your mind is corruption of the Holy Bible. In the year 1611, the Bible was translated from Latin into English. Back then, the Bible contained a total of 80 books, and the last 14 books, which today have been excluded, made up the end of the Old Testament and were as follows: 1 Esdras, 2 Esdras, Tobit, Judith, the rest of Esther, the Wisdom of Solomon. All of these books were removed from all versions except for a 1611 edition, which was the very first edition translated into English. In this first edition, you'll also actually find that Jesus' name is spelled I-E-S-U-S and pronounced Yahshua. So then why does everyone continue to call him Jesus when the letter J hadn't been used at the time? One of these books that is particularly interesting is the Wisdom of Solomon. For those who don't know, Solomon is one of the most legendary characters from the Bible. He was the son of David and is alleged to be the wisest man that has ever lived. He's painted largely as a benevolent figure, but what you read in this book will make you question everything you were told to believe about him. Another form of corruption came in the form of eradicating from Christianity the widely held dogma of reincarnation. At the beginning of the Christian era, reincarnation was one of the pillars of belief. Without it, as later happened, Christianity would lose all logic. How could a benevolent, loving God give one person a silver spoon and leave the next to starve in their ostensibly only earthly life? Early church elders and theologians like Origenes and Basilides and St. Gregory taught reincarnation of the soul as a matter of course. It was written in the Bible, after all. Nowadays, most Christians suspect blasphemy if someone references reincarnation. If you are a Christian and didn't know the Bible had these 14 extra books, well, wouldn't you say you've been tricked? Like today, 5 corporations rule the media. Back then, the church owned the media, or 14 books. How does this all link to Epstein? Well, video from a 2005 police raid at Epstein's Florida mansion showed an array of photos on display, one of which appears to show him with Fidel Castro, and another shows him with none other than Pope, priest, and higher-level members of the Catholic Church. Very clearly to this issue, the failure of U.S. authorities to act forcefully against the Catholic Church in the U.S. clearly demonstrates that the justice system in the U.S. will place political concerns over the moral dictates of our legal system. Don't believe me? Have a look at this excellent 3-minute clip done by citizen journalist Thomas Greenwood.
Queen knew Jimmy Savile. Prince Charles knew Jimmy Savile, regarded him as a great friend. Prince Andrew regards Jeffrey Epstein as a very good friend as well. The Queen appointed Lord Kerry. She made him a lord in 2002. So now this man who covered up paedophilia can now help change laws in the House of Lords. the top British establishment. The Queen knighted Jimmy Savile. The Queen also hung out with paedophile Rolf Harris. She also knighted Rolf Harris. Rolf Harris and Savile were both friends.
But I did notice that you kissed Sir Jim's ring when he came in.
Savile even acquainted himself with one of the poets. Margaret, Savile and Thatcher were very good friends. Thatcher invited Savile to Chequers for many Christmases. Thatcher had in her parliament, and I think in her cabinet, Peter Morrison.
To embark upon this investigation was in part in response to the public concern that some politicians, including Cyril's, used with impunity because they were protected by the establishment.
The inquiry was told the Prime Minister at the time, Margaret Thatcher, was aware of the claims against the MP when she approved his knighthood.
It did. Secret files from MI5's archives suggest in 1979 prosecutors lied to journalists and denied Smith had been investigated.
Smith was re-elected in greater numbers than before, and far from diminishing him, the allegations appear to have had absolutely no effect whatsoever.
Archbishop Edward Adams withheld information from ICSA. He also refused to speak to victims that emailed him.
That the Vatican's UK Papal Nuncio, Archbishop Edward Adams, provides evidence, and since then has simply refused to even acknowledge the ever more urgent letters from this inquiry to him requiring that evidence.
He represents the Catholic Church, the Pope and Jesus, and he didn't give evidence. He suddenly resigned. After his resignation, he was met by the Queen. It seems that the Crown endorsed his actions. Two heads of two churches, the biggest Christian churches, the Catholic Church and the Church of England, have both withheld evidence, and they have a
Christian and can today quote sections from memory from the Bible. Had I known about the sordid reputation of the Catholic Church, I would have never attended a Catholic university and earned 2 graduate degrees. Knowing what I know now, I would consider it to be the height of immorality to remain silent. As a human, I am compelled to speak out against egregious immoral behaviors. There are very few things that I can envision as more unchristian than all over the world should ban the Catholic Church. When will this horror end? When will it stop? It should have stopped decades ago in the US and in the civilized world. The Catholic Church is a cancer on mankind, but they too are being exposed and brought to light. Could it be that the Vatican was overrun by reptilians? What if this happened?
Lucifer is under the Vatican. Why? Why would they keep a mural of Lucifer underneath the Vatican? That's not the only thing they're keeping underneath the Vatican. Check this out.
The first thing we need to do if we're going to find out if the devil is at the Vatican is take a tour underneath the Vatican. As we arrive underneath the Vatican, we see that it's laid out in a number of rooms marked by letters, as we can see in this aerial view map. Let's start off by looking in room C here. As we look into the room, we see that this is a mausoleum of Lucius Tullius Zethus. The Vatican goes on and explained view of the north wall and mosaic floor. In the corners of the mosaic floor there are 8 marble squares poured during the funeral rites carried out in the burial chamber. So here we have a room where offerings are. As we move down further to room H, here we see that this is a mausoleum that is one of the largest and most luxurious mausoleums underneath the Vatican of St. Peter's Basilica. It says that it was built at the beginning of the second half of the 2nd century during the reign of Emperor Marcus Aurelius and belonging to a freedman of the important Valeri family. And as we're in this mausoleum, we see that there's lots of idols from the old Roman Empire. We ask ourselves, why does Rome keep these idols down underneath St. Peter's Basilica? You would think if they were Christians, they would want to clean all this out. I can't imagine anybody who has a true church would keep idols in their churches. We also see 2 figures of genuses with bat wings also portrayed on the walls. Again, this is supposed to be a holy church and a holy place. Now this is supposedly all there for many, many years. Well, as we move to the next room, we find out why they keep all these idols down there in these images. As we move to room U, here we find the shock of all shocks. Here on the wall, it says there is a depiction of Lucifer. That is the light bearer, the morning star. On the opposite of the wall, there is a drawing of Vesper, the evening star, cosmic symbol of the human life cycle. We find out that when we get to room U, here we have a clear depiction of Lucifer underneath the Vatican.